Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
This week on Power Supply, well, we don't have a guest. We have not had any of our podcasts. Sometimes on some of the podcasts that I do, we'll make our first episode sort of introductory to the host. But today, we're over a year and 3 months in. We're about to launch season 3. Season 1 was about 30 episodes, I believe, in the first year. And then we went to a format where each season is going to be an 8-week season. And then we're re-releasing, as many of you have noticed, in between seasons, we're re-releasing some of the episodes from season 1 or our panel discussions from the Beyond Clean conference, where we had a number of the power supply experts on a panel discussion around supply chain conversations that do relate to sterile processing, and Beyond Clean is our sister podcast that is tied to the sterile processing industry. And so I've been really happy with what we've accomplished. I know Garry and Hays, we've really started to cultivate this audience. We've gotten so much positive feedback, for the show and the content that we're putting together. And we've got some things in the works. Actually, right about the time that this episode is going to be releasing, we'll be about a week away from the ARM 22 annual conference in Anaheim. I think anybody who has paid attention to the podcast feed has also seen that we release articles on the go, and many of those are provided by Bob Yokel. And Garry, you may remember his appearance on the show.
Absolutely.
And you've been listening to his podcast forever.
I mean, Garry,
that's where it got all started.
Garry
go ahead, Hays.
He was fanboying, man. I tell you what, he was digging him some Bob. Bob's awesome.
Oh, it blew me away. Like, we're interviewing the man, and I basically went from vendor to supply chain, and I got my start just listening on this rural road out in the Northwest every week, and all I did was pummel those supply chain messages, and I learned so much from Bob and team, and it was great. So I got my start, and then all of a sudden, here he is. He's live. He's on our show, and then he did an interview with us, and I was just like, I was like, can I get your autograph right now? Can I take a picture? I would love if we were on live. I'd get a picture with him. It'd be in my office right now. So it was super cool to have him on.
Yeah, he called me about that.
Well, and Bob also featured us in his magazine, which was really nice. We all did kind of a round robin interview with Bob, and he's the one that alerted us to the fact that we had moved into the #1 podcast in healthcare supply chain. So that just tells you what a big supporter, Bob has been.
He's great.
And he was the original and only healthcare supply chain podcaster for a very good long time. So we've had a lot of people support us along the way, and just want to shout out also, before we kind of dive into this podcast, to everybody who came on as a guest, who shared their insights, information. I can remember, and we'll talk about this as we kind of move forward, as some of the interviews that we remember fondly. There's so many to get to, so certainly don't want to leave anybody out, but so many excellent guests that came on and just gave their time and their insight to the audience out there that's listening to the podcast. So I'd like to kind of start, because one thing that I realized is nobody really knows who we are. I mean, outside of necessarily doing the podcast, or Hays, they might see a lot of your work on LinkedIn. Garry, people out there that are listening, they might have worked with you in the past, or they might be somebody that you're working with currently in an engagement somewhere, or they might be a listener that's listened to some of the other podcasts that I've been involved in, but we've never really kind of introduced what we all do. So I'd like to start with you, Garry, because I know you're an entrepreneur and you've worn multiple hats.
Oh, Hays, here we go. Here we go.
We got to make sure to let everybody know how much fun we have.
Oh, we have a great time.
And how we give each other a hard time. Only some of our guests really know what's going on in the background.
Yeah, we need to quit editing all that out.
I'm sure we'll have some outtakes one of these days. Aaron will take care of us.
Yeah, particularly the ones we did the last week. So, yeah.
So, yeah, Garry, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do today.
Oh, geez. Well,
how long do we have here?
Hays, I promise. I'll put it at the 2 and 2. Johnny Utah. We'll do in 2 minutes right here. Okay. But,
okay.
No, it's been pretty diverse, played some college baseball back in the day. And, obviously I was going to school to be a physical therapist. That was my goal at the time. And it just kind of evolved out of that. I did a ton of hours in the hospital setting. I love taking care of patients. That's why I think you always hear I really focus on mission and really care about the end results with our guests as we talk about really what's the true mission of supply chain. But, got into, the vendor side quite a bit and did everything from, pharma, specialty pharma, then got into medical device, hands-on with some patients on neuromodulation, and then obviously got in the OR, trauma and spine, and in and out of the OR and out of the hospital, and eventually had the opportunity to move over into supply chain, where I started the Bob Yokel orientation and learned about supply chain. Everything I wanted to know as a vendor, I started learning at that point in time. And gosh, that's been almost 10 years ago. I started that direction and worked my way up at senior leadership and taken administrator on call and was part of lots of different implementations and went out on my own at some point in time. And then here we are almost 5 years later, added a couple new partners, Jeff Stevens and Nate Barker with Discover S3. We're over a year in the making now, but probably been working together for the last couple of years. Just some great partners with Discover S3 and tackling everything from expense management to ERP implementation and working across the country. We've been very blessed and very humbled at the outcry. I've been saving lots of dollars for lots of entities and really developing good collaborative relationships with vendors. So just here I am, and then ran into Justin in another setting. And Justin's like, hey, I know this guy named Hays down in Tennessee, and you want to join us on a podcast? And I'm like, what am I going to add to this podcast besides Hays making fun of me all the time, which I love. It's great. I'm a big target. It's been fun. So I'm just glad to be here, man. Just really have been excited for the opportunity and working with Aaron as well. It's been a blessing. So very glad to be here.
So Hays, I think many people are at least familiar with your face as they scroll through their LinkedIn pages. And it's funny because they only see your name on the podcast. There's no video here. So you've got content kind of out there, and you also put a lot of groups together. So why don't you talk a little bit about your endeavors and your background and experience?
Hays is a good looking guy. That's why he does video. He's just a good looking guy. That's just in a platonic kind of way. All right.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're very inclusive here. But yeah, the good thing about doing this, first, I do it because I love it. It's been so much fun getting to work with all of you, the three of us, and coming on here. And it's just been a lot of fun. Met a lot of great people. And, it's something I'd never done, obviously. But, over the last year, I've learned a lot and gotten to, again, meet some really, really good people. But what I do is my real job for the last 20 years. I've got three groups that I work with. I've got relationships with hospital CEOs, hospital supply chain, and pharmacy leaders. And we bring those three groups together in person each and every year. And then we allow companies, various manufacturers, solution providers, IT, you name it, they are able to come together and meet in small groups with these executives. Again, I've been in the middle of that for, 20 years now. And I have the greatest job in the world because I sit in the middle between the two in the greatest industry on earth, honestly. I think so. So yeah, I have a good job, and basically you will see me from time to time on LinkedIn, and the whole goal there is to promote providers that are really, really good at what they do and kind of provide clarity for the suppliers out there to learn from.
Well, I'll just echo, really highlighting the successes that providers are happening out there. That's definitely something we want to do more and more here on Power Supply. And we've had a number of providers on the show and even had some excellent success stories like Susie, who's out there in Arizona and actually shared her back order process with us as bonus content on the smartphone app. And so, Garry, you talked about the mission, and Hays, you really talked about highlighting successes. And I think, that's what is really great about social media, what's really great about podcasting. And really, we need to all lift each other up because it's tough in healthcare right now. There's no doubt. And so a lot of challenges and a lot of hurdles, and any reason for inspiration or to help people just survive their day to day a little bit better or give them some tips for career growth. Those are all reasons to do a podcast like this. I'll talk a little bit about my background. This is one of 4 podcast brands. Obviously, our audience is healthcare supply chain, but I also am the host and CEO of the First Case podcast, which is for the operating room, Beyond Clean, which is for sterile processing, which I mentioned before, and then also Transmission Control, which is an infection prevention and public health podcast that I do. And I have a number of other great colleagues and co-hosts on all those other brands, but the two of you are some of the most fun. And we definitely have.
Of course.
You are.
Of course.
And we definitely have the most fun during our interviews as well. I also am the vice president of sales and small minority owner of a company called Green Security, which does vendor credentialing services. And Garry, that's actually how you and I met originally, as we worked on a project together. And so, I've really seen it from a lot of different angles because I also have a background as a registered nurse. And I love to tell the story about how I got into podcasting, which is while I was still working as a registered nurse, I was a huge super fan of the Boston Celtics, lived up in New England. Baby. And they almost won it this year, not quite. And was a huge super fan. And it was like 2004. And I was doing a job as a nurse where I was doing medical necessity reviews. And I would call into the hospitals and speak with the utilization review nurses and get information and extend care and whatnot. And they'd always say to me, have you ever, you got a great voice for radio. How come you've never done radio? And I said, do you know how much people who get paid in radio? Like, wait. Believe me.
Is that like a backhanded compliment? I think that might be.
Casey,
yeah. I think so.
Come on, Casey Kasem to Joe Rogan. Let's go. Come on.
I think you're right. They were like, hey, you probably should consider a different job. No. Well, so I eventually networked my way into being the first person ever credentialed with access to the Boston Celtics locker room from the new media. So blogging, podcasting, anything like that. It was a ton of fun. I was actually behind the scenes when they won the championship in 2008. That was the first full season that I covered the team. I'd secured the credentials halfway through their, worst season in a long time. And then they still extended them to me when the next season came around, and was highlighted in a small documentary film as well. So I had a film crew following me around for the second half of that championship season and on the way. So I've got a whole movie to remind me about how much fun that was. So that was a great experience. And then when I got into sales and did a lot of education around the country and at national conferences, people would ask me all the time as they'd learn about my fandom and love for the Boston Celtics. They'd ask me why I wasn't podcasting in healthcare. And so when I met my business partner at Green Security and he recruited me over, I kind of moved into this entrepreneurial world, which I think gave me the flexibility to kind of launch my own special projects as well. So was really indebted and will never forget that opportunity got presented to me, that I could move into creating podcast brands like this one.
That's
so,
a great story. Like, who were the big stars at that point in 2008, 2009? The big three?
It was Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce. Now, Paul had been there since he was drafted. On draft night, they went out and traded for Ray Allen, and that was all part of their move to get Kevin Garnett to accept a trade from the Minnesota Timberwolves. So that had already been discussed between Danny Ainge and Kevin McHale, but Kevin was a little apprehensive. He's the lifer there in Minnesota. And then when they went and got Ray, I think that was like the final piece of the puzzle that was starting to come together. So then they traded some prospects July 31st, 2007, and got Kevin Garnett on the Boston Celtics. And they also had Rajon Rondo, who had a great career, and Kendrick Perkins, who is all over ESPN nowadays as an announcer. That was their two. One was a rookie, I think, and the other, or maybe they were second-year players, but they were young players around those two megastars, and they had some role players too.
Destin, do you think any of those guys would come on the podcast in healthcare and talk about supply chain somehow? Do you think we could kind of sideways that in somehow?
I could cut a clip from a prior interview and splice it in, and we could try to make it relevant.
Very nice.
Or maybe we could get like words that they said and make a sentence for us.
And make it supply chain. Exactly. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
That's a really cool backstory.
It was just a ton of fun. And, we get to talk to a lot of people too. And I think sometimes people are hesitant to reach out to somebody that they don't know, like on social media. I think a lot of times people will look on LinkedIn and they'll see somebody who's got something to say or has a really great message. And then they're kind of like, well, I don't really know that person. And it's almost like, for the sales professionals out there, sales call reluctance, right? Oh, what if they don't respond?
Fear, yeah.
And there's like this kind of stop. And what I have found since, doing podcasting and networking, both within and outside of healthcare, is that most of the time, if your request is sincere and you can potentially bring any value to the other person, they're almost always willing to help. As long as you're showing respect for their time and you've got a really specific purpose, and there was something about, what they had to say on social media that drew your attention, I think people are usually very willing to respond. And so I like to encourage people really take advantage of this tool and network out there. And if there's something that you're struggling with in your day to day, I know there's kind of some hesitancy to go to live events now, or the funding isn't there anymore. Like there's some obstacles to really getting around your colleagues in some cases. I can't say enough about how valuable social media can be to helping you gain experience and insight from colleagues throughout the industry.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And obviously we use LinkedIn a lot. And I would encourage our listeners, as they're with us right now, please share the content from Power Supply out there, even if it's a like, a reshare, or a comment. That helps us find better guests. If you are somebody who might, at least my opinion is, if you're somebody who has something good to say, we'd love to talk to you about it as well. And so,
absolutely,
to our listeners, help us out, and we'll try to help you and get better content, better guests. But it does take, again, when you see that Power Supply pop up, please, give us something. And it helps a lot, just because, again, your like could show it to another 500 people, and, that could help us all out. So we would appreciate that for sure.
I should probably throw out our website information while we're talking about that, powersupplymedia.net, and also our email address, info@powersupplymedia.net. So if you do have a guest or a topic that you feel like we really haven't covered, or maybe there's another little angle on a topic that we did talk about where we left something out of the discussion, we definitely want to hear from you, especially if you want to be a guest and talk about that information. So,
or if you want to come on and make fun of Garry or something, I mean, that's highly encouraged. So that would be good. Yeah,
that's fine.
Would be great.
We got to talk about that. We do have a ton of fun in the background. So
oh my gosh,
just so everybody knows, the way that these go somewhat smoothly.
Here we go.
Is that we've got a Slack channel where the three of us talk during the interviews or chat to make sure that, everybody knows who's going to ask the next question, or, we're just kind of coordinating the interview. More than any of the other podcasts that I do, there is a whole lot of harassment going on in that chat. And
positive, HR compliant, positive harassment. Thank you.
yeah, definitely some pictures. So there's some subtle communication going on in there too, but
no, appropriate. Absolutely. We sent some good gifts. We got, Aaron's making sure
Aaron's
we're all
a
legit
minister,
on
by
this.
the way. So he has to make sure we're on, up and up for sure.
Just so everybody knows, Aaron Leslie is our producer for all of the podcasts.
He's a rock star.
And he's a rock star. He cleans us up.
He's awesome.
But Justin,
He's
to
great.
your point, because to our listeners right now, y'all are hearing us. We actually are essentially in a Zoom call, essentially with another platform. And so we can see each other. So we are chatting in the background as we interview folks, but we also can see each other. And so it's a constant stream of something in the background and everything with all of us here. And we have a good time. And I hope it comes across to you as a listener that you're getting, you're having fun with us as well.
Absolutely. That's the biggest compliment I've heard is if they had a great time. It was educational, but they had fun. It wasn't just a lecture in college that you had to sit through and, check the box. You got done with it. It's been a lot of fun. And I will tell you, I hate to say it, but I'm going to bring it up right now, but that was a great question. I think I'm still in the lead. I'm probably going to say it right now, but I'm probably in the lead, Hays. If we go back and Aaron pulls all of it, it's probably...
I don't think so.
Probably Justin and I leading that, probably. Hays, you're right there, but I think it's probably Justin and I, probably.
So just so everybody knows on this one, we have a healthy competition going, and I don't remember when it started, but it was definitely...
It just evolved. Yes.
I know for a fact, by the time we were 5 episodes in, the competition was on, but one of our early guests, somebody asked a question, and the guest said, "That's a great question," and they probably... doled out about 3 or 4 great questions as we were going through the interview.
Oh yeah.
And so we started having an internal tally here where we're all trying to maneuver for the compliment from our guest of "that's a great question." So
and you should see the light up on the video when that happens. It's like, yes. And
maybe, Gary, we should share this with you, Gary. It might be a good time while everybody's listening with us that many times we see the guests on the front end for you to make sure that they can at least give you something, a little encouragement. And so we'll say, hey, Johnny, when Gary asks you a question, if you would just please just say, "It's a great question."
So wrong.
And we do that for you. And I hope you don't mind, but it's all in good, we're trying to look out after you. Yeah.
Build me up. I appreciate that, Hays. Thank you so much. That's just kind of you.
That's
Thanks
what
for
kind
the
of people
setup.
we really are here.
The volunteer has spoken. The Tennessee volunteer has spoken.
Yes, I'm a Tennessee Volunteer fan, by the way, and so I'm pretty proud of it. And we've had a lot of disappointing years, but still a fan.
Love it. And Hays is our guy that asks just the random kickoff question. He comes up with just what's your favorite ice cream or what's your favorite 3 sitcoms? He's had some interesting ones, but I think it's a really good icebreaker. You brought that up to be part of the show and just started making people relax and not be nervous during the tape or the interview. And I think it's been really good.
Yeah. And when we asked you about your 3 sitcoms, you started talking about things that are happening in the 40s and the 50s. And I was like, I didn't think you were that old.
There is nothing wrong with the Lawrence Welk Show and Star Trek and Happy
Lucy.
Days. What's wrong with those
Lucy.
3?
But clearly, Justin, I don't understand what this filter we have on him. It makes him look like looks like he's only about 65 or 70 here, but he must be much older.
So wrong. Oh my God!
I think my favorite.
Justin, help me! Help, Justin! Help! I'm hurting right now. Help me, please.
You know that's not how this works. My favorite was the time that we started teasing Garry about being an escaped convict, and I think that went on for about 2 months, and then he shows up for the podcast one day, and he's buttoned all the way to the top.
And he looks like he just got out of the mess hall, and he's all buttoned up. Oh my goodness! It was my Cool Hand Luke.
It was my cool hand Luke Focus, Paul Newman. That's where we went, and I loved it. I mean, nobody can eat 50 hard-boiled eggs. I could do that, but you got to have fun, man. You guys laid that on for like 2 months, forever. Well, I should just zip this up right now. There you go. Is that better?
You kind of have that. You're rocking that again.
I wish we had the video. In this case, the video. Like, can we get a screenshot and make that?
No, we're not.
Make that the episode picture.
Well, but as a listener,
gosh. Aaron, lose that. Aaron, lose that one.
Listener, I hope you are developing a sense of our personalities, and we're all in in this together. Kind of one of my little pet sayings that I'm trying to make supply chain sexy, and we got a long way to go, particularly with having Garry and Justin in here. But but it is important.
Spilling over.
But it is. I mean, supply chain can be a dry subject sometimes, but guess what? It's so damn vital. We cannot do anything without it. And so I love doing this, and obviously with Garry and Justin and Aaron. And so as a listener, if you enjoy this at least a little bit, give us something back and send us some names and give us support, because it's a blast to do, and I'm glad we're doing it. We're having success with it as well.
Yeah, I want to kind of end on this one, which is maybe some highlighted podcast interviews or topics that we covered, over the last year. And I'll give both of you a chance to think about it. I've got one I want to call out just because I think it's quite relevant right now. But we've had so many. I want to got to give a shout out to Deb Wiggs for being our very first podcast guest, having no idea what she was getting into. And many of our other future guests have had a chance to listen to episodes. And so they kind of know what we're doing here. But for many of our early guests, it was kind of a leap of faith to see, what the project would look like once it was produced and everything else. So I definitely want to give a shout out to a lot of those early episodes and guests that we had. I also want to give a shout out to, our expert series, so like Guillermo Ramos and Vin Matozo and Ashleah Safrau, and we got a couple others as well. And so I just think the support that we've gotten to continue pushing content out, even if it's not on a podcast, on a monthly basis from those experts is really great too. The episode that stands out to me is Kelly McCrory over at Jefferson. I thought she just had a lot of passion for the conversation, and we just talked about a revenue cycle and getting supply chain connected with revenue cycle. And just to kind of give a shout out to Vin Matozo, I think that's in line with a lot of what he talked about with us and his expert series around interoperability. So how do we connect all those things, not only just through having increased awareness, but how do we connect revenue cycle with supply chain in ways that are more automated by taking all these disparate systems and having them talk to each other so that everybody can have those kinds of conversations that might be otherwise somewhat out of their silo. But you're hearing it more and more. Connecting revenue cycle with supply chain is becoming essential in today's environment. So, I always want to call that out. And actually, Kelly was the president of the local ARM chapter in southeastern Pennsylvania, one which I was the education chair for 5 years under her presidency. And she always brought energy and enthusiasm. So like you said, Hays, she definitely made supply chain shiny and fun and made sure that people enjoyed, getting together, and also got to learn a lot while we were there. And so in many respects, that was an inspiration for doing the podcast. All right. Which one of you wants to go next?
Well, Justin, I think we've had a lot of forward-thinking leaders in the supply chain world that have really stepped out. I really love the fact that they have calculated risk and they've been successful. I think we've had a lot of different people, from Ashleah, to Michelle, just different opportunities where they've dove into different avenues on their own. So we've had a lot of people that have really stepped out, but I can't go in another direction. I got to go with the Godfather and Bob Yokel, man. I got to go back just because, that's where it all started personally for me. And I I just was really, really impressed. And what he does for this environment, he continues to give and continues to add. And I know we'll probably have him back on again. I'm sure we will at some point in time. And that's another thing, too. I know we will probably have some repeat people come back and just give another update or where they're at. But Bob just really, his knowledge is so deep, and to gather 30 minutes of what he had to say from the value analysis perspective and supply chain, it was just great. It's just over the top.
I mean,
for
Gary,
me.
have you
So
slept
it
since
was
that
really
episode?
personal.
I'm just curious.
No, it got me fired up. It seriously fired me up. I'm like, let's just keep driving, man. And the serotonin, norepinephrine, and the dopamine was all flying, man. So there was no fight or flight. It was game on.
Dropping
Let's
some
go.
knowledge
Let's
right
go.
there. That's impressive.
Well, baby, let's go. Let's go. I'm ready. Let's go. So, anyways, that was my fave. Justin and Hays. It was just great. There's been some great people on there, and we've just evolved. We just keep moving in that direction. It's just been a great time.
I'll just throw in there. First of all, I have to say thank you to Justin, obviously, because you are the professional here, and you have taught me and Gary how to do this, and and obviously with our guest. I think I won't say we were terrible. We weren't great when we started, but, we're learning and evolving along with hopefully our listenership here. And to me, that's been the really fun thing, is that I think we've all gotten better at what we're doing here. And we brought along different guests. And I think we're getting more out of the guests. At least that's what we're hopeful. We try to. And I don't want to exclude anybody because I think we've had a lot of really killer guests. But one that sticks out, it's the most recent, is Steve Downey at Cleveland Clinic. That was recent. Steve is a longtime friend, and he's in a great position, leading arguably one of the the world's best supply chain, one of the world's best healthcare systems, arguably, and he was great. And so again, back to the point though, it's been fun for us all to evolve in this and to see the listenership grow, the downloads grow, and more people are reaching out. So that's what's been fun, and and trying to and unfortunately Gary's still stuck where he started, but I think ultimately we've all improved.
Wow. Just one more hit, one more left, right. Thank gosh I played for Ed Chef in baseball. I have no feelings.
I didn't know how much time we had left here. I figured I better tee off one more time here just for fun. But we did have, honestly, maybe I shouldn't pick on Gary so much, but I mean, he clearly deserves it. But I have to be careful that our listenership doesn't think that I'm picking on you.
It's all good.
Yeah, we do have a great time. And Hays, you're a master of finding excellent guests. Mark Van Summeren's another one.
Yeah, Mark was great.
That's it's a great call out for an early episode talking about the pandemic and getting some statistics and looking at trending. I just thought that was a phenomenal interview. We'll have to have him back and take a look back. And I think that's planned for this season 3, which we're kicking off right now. This is the very beginning of season 3. And before you know it, we're going to have, 10, 20 of these seasons behind us. There's always something to talk about in supply chain. There's always other little bits if we really break it down and have those conversations. And I'll also echo what you said, Hays, you were talking about how much fun we're having and that, you've gotten some guidance on, how to do podcasting, but it really, the most important thing is your personalities coming through. That's how podcasts are successful. People want to listen to people they think that, they might know or that they feel like they get to know over time and that the conversation's casual. The last thing we want to do is be taking a PowerPoint presentation and turning it into audio format and pushing it out. These should be engaging and fun, and you guys make that so easy to do. So you're both a blessing to do this with.
Well, and thanks to you too, Justin. I echo Hays's points, and I want to let you know I respect my elders, and that's Hays. I just want you to let you know I respect my elders, and I don't ever say anything too horribly bad to Hays, and I just want to let you know how that stands, Justin.
But Gary, you do understand that I color my hair gray, and I'm going to let it. And I've decided during COVID, I'm just going to let it go natural again. I'm going to go back to my regular brown, and so I look older than I really am.
You look distinguished. I mean, tenured and distinguished. I mean, I think you're like a professor that's been at a college for like 40 years. I really respect you. I'm really impressed.
That warms my heart. That really makes me feel really, 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 really special.
Dr. Hays, PhD.
We do have a good time. So again, to our listenership out there, thank you. Just thank you.
Absolutely.
That's all I can say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Keep pushing us, allowing us to get better guests. We'll do it as long as you will. I've enjoyed it.
Yep. Thanks for staying with us. Tell your friends about us. Send us good guests and topics, and we will continue to push this forward. And we do all hope that you're enjoying the Power Supply podcast. And so, as always, that's going to do it for this week's show. But I do want to remind everyone that you can support Power Supply by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. You can also find us on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Spotify, or actually, if you don't use any of those, you can also just search for Power Supply on your favorite podcast application. I mentioned bonus content earlier in this episode, like Susie Collins' backorder workflow. That's available by downloading our smartphone app, and then you go to the episode, click on the gift box, and you can pull down bonus PDF content. And we're always looking for more bonus content from folks that have success stories out there in the field and providers that want to share insights so that others in this industry can be successful. And while you're there, if you're downloading that smartphone app, make sure you give us a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And as we mentioned, we want you to send us emails. So let me put that out there again, info@powersupplymedia.net. Guests or future topics, send it on over there. And on behalf of Hays, Garry, and myself, a heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in, not only to this episode, but all of the episodes of Power Supply and supporting us by listening to this show. That's going to do it. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to let Hays take us out. What are they listening to, Hays?
Power Supply.